Getting leads is actually the easy part. Like if you want to get leads, you can get leads. You can spend some on digital modestly. You can work with third parties. There's different ways to get leads. To me, where the firms that are winning are, is they know how to convert those leads. Conversion one is from lead to appointment. And then the second one is, can you get them from appointment all the way to client? And firms stumble on that.
Hey, welcome to The Rising Tide. This week, we are so excited to talk about growth, really from a practical, hands-on perspective with our friend, John Wernz. John comes with a ton of experience on running agencies, running national RIAs, working in private equity, building new fintech companies. I have a lot of admiration for John and his success, and also just his friendship and his ability to be candid on how to really get it going in 2024 and beyond. So John, really quick, why don't you kick us off and just give us a little bit of background? Because my Reader's Digest version is a little bit light. I'd love to kind of unpack a little bit of your background.
Well, I'm going to do it fast. So if there's any part you want me to come back to, let me know, because it does kind of weaves and wanders and then looks like a plan, even though maybe it wasn't at every stage, and ended up in a very cool place. So I grew up a marketer by training, specifically around direct response and digital. I ran a large agency. I'm out of Minneapolis, and our largest client for a lot of years was a firm named Fisher Investments, who seems to always be in the front page of the news, and helped them with a lot of their offline tactics, including direct response TV, direct response radio, direct response print, beginnings of digital. They were already experts at direct mail, and really learned the business inside and out working directly with Fisher for those years. From there, I was recruited to a firm named Wealth Enhancement Group. At the time, a smaller Midwestern RIA on the back of a radio show that really sought to market in multi-channel and really to do a lot of different growth channels, and became one of the preeminent marketers, and then later also an aggregator, and has since grown to over $80 billion in assets. So when I was there, we were just under two. I was there for 13 years and left at about 55 billion, and they've continued their phenomenal growth and are now over 80. I left after being an operator or a CMO for 13 years, really with the goal of becoming an advisor to firms in different areas. So I do that in a couple different ways. One is I work for a private equity firm named Great Hill Partners out of Boston, a growth equity firm focused on investing in growing RIAs. So we're very active in those conversations and in that market today. And then on a second area, and Judd, actually kind of how we met, is an advisor to a number of growing fintech firms. My background being so much around organic growth is where it's the deepest. So working with firms like Dataline and the lead gen space, Testimonial IQ with testimonials, and then where we met together on a firm named Lifefield with tax optimization. So a varied group of firms that I'm either on the board of or an advisor to.
Pretty fun to meet other marketers in a tax optimization technology company, right?
You and I bonded pretty quickly is how I remember it.
Yeah, no, it's such a good crew. Really, really excited to, watch them continue to develop. But so looking at what you see today, whether it's in Dataline or Testimonial IQ or in Great Hill, I think you have an interesting perspective because you're watching these wealth management firms, and generally they're B2B to C companies. It's a corporate entity that attracts financial advisors. So serves them foundationally, from compliance to technology to service, and really providing them scale. Then ultimately to grow and attract retail consumers, people, just ordinary people, any one of us on this podcast, any one of us listening. It's got to be an interesting time with all the things that are going on in media and marketing, and even like just the trends inside of the consolidation aspects of our industry. What does that look like from your perspective, from building technology companies and really investing in some of these companies? What are the things and trends that you're seeing that might be, worth sharing today?
I'll start, and I think we can, as you said, divide that into kind of the technology companies, and then maybe we can later touch on, what we're seeing, RIAs or individual clients and how that's working. But on the B2B fintech side, a lot of it, there's new and old. I will say the old still works, right? It's that constant drumbeat of being in the industry press. And it's amazing how well that still works. Our friends at Lifefield have been experts at that for years, right? I mean, they are doing podcasts, they are doing bylines. I mean, so it's just like that drumbeat hits. And as I've worked with some of these other firms, and as they're coming up, they're mirroring that and seeing those same areas out there. There's not that many publications in our industry. There's 10 or 15 that probably move the needle. And if you're in them regularly, the phone rings quite a bit. The other one, which is on the tried and true old school side, which I still see working amazingly well, is awards. There's a time I kind of scoffed at industry awards, like, well, come on, this is the same group of people celebrating the same friends we all have over and over again. So, there's a little bit where we're like, okay, that amazing firm has won every award for the last 15 years. Okay, got it. But, when these new firms pop up and they're showing something that maybe a little message that people haven't seen before, definitely the phone rings. And those inbound leads are definitely coming in on that way. Then on the other side is where I'm seeing more account-based marketing, where it is really, we're leaning more into the technology side of, you're running an amazing list, you're segmenting everyone, you're figuring out what their pain points are, and you're doing a lot of that through big data. And I hate to say AI, because I think it's a little stretch to say that's AI, at least, but in terms of big data, and those tools just get better and better. So when all of a sudden you're pulling this together, you're like, well, these are the 8 firms I should be talking to. And, that validates, and you're right on 6 of them. That's pretty impressive stuff. So on the new side, or the new school side, that's definitely what I see working, is account-based marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. As much as I wish I didn't agree with all the awards stuff, because as an investor in some of these companies, you get into like the actual like nuts and bolts that exist. And sometimes you're like, well, people aren't voting on nuts and bolts. They're voting on like, perception. But the thing that I have to always keep in mind is like, you win not if you apply not. And you got to participate in the community of our industry. It's good for a lot of things. And it's really good to use that as internal benchmarks, if nothing else, to help inspire your team to do more and add more value, even if it's the things that are not noticeable even in sales, but like in just client experience and brand and stuff like that.
Agreed.
One of the things that I think is particularly difficult today is for firms that are looking to grow organically. Let's say a wealth management firm like a Fisher. If I wanted to create a new Fisher Investments, and Fisher's going in the news right now just in terms of like seeking outside investment, and it's an interesting time in that company's history. If I were to create a company like that, what are the things that people are going to need to do? Like, what's the Cliff's Notes version of how I should actually work to try to grow a business like that these days?
In my world, there's really 3 different areas or segments of maturity in that. And when I see a lot of the content out there, articles, it depends who you're speaking to, right? Because every firm is either in bucket A, B, or C, and they're trying to get to the next bucket. And so sometimes I read an article, I'm like, well, that's for bucket A. Bucket C is not going to be in any way interested in that because they've already done that. Or if you're reading one, the reverse, where it's like this advanced bucket C, you're like, that's way over bucket A's head. Like they've got to do 9 more steps to get there. And so when I say those 3 areas, just quickly, one is, do you have your foundational marketing done? Let's call that A. And that means you have a website, you have a brand. Are you consistently saying the same language? Do you have kind of the nuts and bolts? Are you managing your online presence? Like, okay, so that's one. And a lot of firms don't even have that, right? So that's kind of foundational marketing. Let's just call that one. I see a lot of firms now moving into the second bucket. I'm going to call that inbound marketing. And that means they're putting content out. They're doing educational webinars. They're doing different posts on social media, right? They're constantly putting things out on YouTube. They're putting things out into the market. And that's another really good step. And I see kind of, maybe firms under 5 billion, maybe are on the foundational phase, or even under 3, kind of this 3 to 15 billion. There's some firms that are starting to really lean into inbound marketing, right? And they're doing a good job, and they're repurposing, and they're using good content. What I see the least of, and I think where people are the most interested in, is bucket C, which I'm going to call growth or channel marketing. And that's where you're spending budgets on channels that you know the payback of. And it could be all things digital. It could be third-party people like Dataline, Smart Asset. It could be custodial referral programs. It could be old school things like direct mail. But those are growth channels where you're like, I spent $100,000 and I got this break even or payback, and I'm going to do it more and more and more. And that's the segment. Again, there's only really 15 or 20 firms that do a lot of that. That's a pretty narrow group out there. And we all know the big names that do it and do it well, but there's just not that many. And that's where I'm so surprised, Judd, that there's not more that have gone from bucket A to bucket B all the way into the channel marketing. And it still surprises me there's only a handful.
Yeah, I think the industry, it's something like 3% of gross revenue is reinvested into marketing on average, but it's such a compounding effect, because I think it's like, you think about your cost acquisition will go up if you use bucket 3, That's
Yep.
fair, but your overall AUM or assets under management is also going to go up if you have any level of results. So if you should expect to spend 1 to 3 years worth of revenue to acquire a 10 plus year relationship, I mean, the math computes, but I think a lot of times people have not wanted to really invest in their business like that. They much more confidently just hire another financial advisor and feel like that's going to be a solution versus building these, seemingly potentially evergreen channels that could help you really grow.
I agree. And I'm sure you guys get the question too. It's like, well, what percentage of revenue should I spend on marketing? Is it 2%? Is it 6%? Is it 4%? Like, I get that question all the time. And the answer is, well, it depends how far you've matured through those buckets. And then that's, so it should be a couple percent for just to get the foundation out there. And then a couple more percent if you're doing inbound. And then when I think of those channels, the third bucket that we talked about, that's bottom up, right? That's, if it's working, spend more, right? To the point of declining returns. And that number can get really high because if you're spending it, you have a proven formula for return and your leading indicators. It's like valuations in this business have not come down. Those are just, so if you do that arbitrage into what it costs to acquire a client through marketing versus what it's worth in the market, it's a pretty good payback.
And so kind of in the spirit of all three buckets, perhaps, ideally wealth management firms want to attract a good size average client, right? You'd probably like to have somebody, where you can manage a couple $1 million plus. And some firms and I work with firms that have like $20 million minimums or $20 million averages. But most commonly we see firms that have like between 500,000 and like 3 million is probably kind of that sweet spot. What does it look like for firms today to practically attract and market to those companies using any one of those three buckets? Like, where if we had to, and this is the hardest part of the question, if we had to sit down as a CMO of a new firm and say, we are going to put new clients into our CRM this next 6 months, how are firms doing that and having success these days?
There are a couple components to me, though, that drive that. So kind of what does it need to look like internally to then get that working? And one of the statements I make is getting leads is actually the easy part. Like, if you want to get leads, you can get leads. You can spend some on digital modestly. You can work with third parties, like we've talked about with Smart Asset and Dataline and Zoe. There's different ways to get leads. To me, where the firms that are winning is they know how to convert those leads. And when I say convert, there's two different conversions. Conversion one is from lead to appointment. And that is, do you have people who are ready to work and qualify and get these people into an office or on the phone or on a Zoom with the firm? And then the second one is, can you get them from appointment all the way to client? Firms stumble on that. I mean, the number of firms we've talked about this before, but I'll run into, they're like, oh, we spent 50 grand on digital. I got 500 leads and 0 clients. Or I did a large test with a third party lead generator and we got a ton of leads and we didn't convert any of them. That's the pain I hear more than I can't find the leads.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people that just kind of trust like one element of that channel and like, hey, I got a new contact and like, okay, what did you do with that contact? Well, I sent him back an email. I'm like, well, what else? I'm like, I sent him another email. I'm like, when did you call them? And I think the interesting thing is, even with technology companies, there's still a bit of interfacing that happens, sometimes a lot. And I think the differentiated experiences that are from the people that want to be multi-channel, multifaceted in their interactions with people, for, all sorts of things. I was working on, like, I got to do for one of the technology companies I'm invested in, like, a penetration testing for part of a audit process. So the team with that reached out to me through email, and no sooner did I get the email, I also got a text. He's like, hey, I sent you a really big email. Here's my phone. Call me. I'm open the next 5 minutes. You want to chat? And I'm like, I totally missed that text, but like, it definitely piqued my attention because I got 3 other firms introduced to me at the same time. Well, this guy went the next level to start more of a interaction. And I think in today's arena, there's a way more competitive space. And we have to be willing to come and play, or, we're going to be sitting here with 500 new contacts that have nothing to show for it.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, the systems that drive that, the marketing automation that drives that, I mean, the average number of touch points to get a lead to become an appointment is over 10.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, those are emails, those are texts, if compliantly done, those are phone calls, those are all the, different outreaches. So if you don't have a system for that, you probably shouldn't be spending money to generate leads.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So John, let's break down. I'd love to understand two of the companies that you're a part of with Testimonial IQ and Dataline. Could you give us kind of a quick breakdown of what those companies do, what their mission is, and where you're finding them picking up speed?
I'd be happy to. So let's start with Dataline. Dataline is a third-party lead generator, similar to Smart Assets Zoe. There's a number of good firms out there doing good work. Dataline was born with the idea that higher quality leads would ease that pressure of conversion. So it is a very targeted lead generation platform. You can target both the behavioral and the psychographic elements of what someone's doing, and of course the network. And then those leads are transacted to one person. And that means a firm, once it makes sense, that goes to a firm, and that firm can then work that lead without the pressure of working with other ones. So it has really, again, been focused around quality of lead generation. And that has gone extremely well with back-end metrics and how people are seeing those convert, and has made that pain of building all those conversion tools a little bit less because of the quality of those leads on the front end.
So can you break that down for me a little bit? If I'm that CMO, I'm sitting in that chair and I'm starting to sweat a little bit because it's been 2 months and I haven't got anything to show for it. I maybe have a new website or an updated logo. I feel existentially a lot of whatever about it. And so if I call Dataline, how does that process work for me to really start to operationalize that sort of solution in my business?
So if you think of leads, some lead programs, they are multi-sold, meaning multiple companies get a lead at the same time. And then there's kind of this race to get them. And that creates a very high pressured situation where it's like, you have to figure out, can I get to them in seconds or minutes, not hours or days? Dataline was designed so that, whenever you're working with a lead, whether it's you or working with other people, sooner is better. So that's a marketing truth we all know. But with Dataline, it's like I can get back to them an hour or two and still have a very productive conversion rate and still really get those people through my funnel and know that I'm going to work that. And that's pretty different from what I'm seeing with other lead generators out there, where the leads are not as qualified in that way. So a firm still needs to be able to convert leads, but doesn't maybe need a call center with a boiler room mentality that's out there doing that in minutes and seconds a day. So that's been very positive. The other one, again, is the targeting aspect of it. A lot of leads, it's like, well, do they have money? Well, does that mean that they want asset management, or do they want comprehensive planning and tax and estate? Do they want a comprehensive solution? Do they want a passive solution? A lot of that can be figured out in the data of what they submit when they become a lead. And then a firm can really target or zero in on that. And that was something, as in my days as a CMO, I struggled with. I was like, well, that lead, yes, they have the right amount of assets, but they don't want what I'm selling, which at the time was comprehensive asset management. Like, they just want market timing, or they want this thing. So getting people into the right buckets and then making them a proprietary lead allows people really to convert them better. And that's what CMOs have really liked about the Dataline solution thus far.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so you're able to target based on niche and geography as well?
Absolutely. A lot of people will bid. And that's still, I don't know what you guys have seen. It bums me out to no end that geography or distance from office is still often an indicator of quality of lead. That a high percentage of the population still needs that. I want that stat to go away. It drives me bananas. Lots of our firms also take national, are set up to do people nationally. So they're happy to take people from anywhere. But if you do get someone within 75, 50 miles of an office, unfortunately, that lead is still more valuable. I shouldn't say unfortunately, but I'm ready for the day when that's not a truth anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's everybody's got all these different feelings around that. And I know people that really want to be able to go in and wring the neck of their advisor if something's wrong. And it's like, hey, it's a quick drive. I can go do that.
I love that.
Not that really happens, but it's certainly, there's just that psychological safety, I think, a little bit of like, I could drive by their office and And down here where I live in the Carolinas is actually fun because like I think there's strategic locations with different offices. I was walking down in Beaufort not too long ago, and I walked by a friend of mine's office, and I just sent her a note. I'm like, "Hey, Laura, I just walked by your office on a Saturday morning. It's good to see your firm." Her firm's Somerset Advisory. She's part of Hightower, and it's fun to have that little bit of like location. And I think in certain cities like that, I think you might just win based on proximity in certain ways because, people want to they want to be able to sit down and they want to have a conversation and feel like they're not on Zoom or whatever in those moments. So I don't know. It's the same as marketing. It's got to be omnichannel. You have to be multidimensional. You have to be diversified in all these different ways that you're available.
Agreed. Couldn't agree more.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content for fintech and financial services companies. Learn more at turncast.com.
Let's shift over to Testimonial IQ. Obviously, we had the advertising rule change. For the longest time, everyone was a secret client of their advisory firm. You couldn't really mention, who you worked with. You could be very ambiguous in copy. I remember doing campaigns where we would do like travel logs where we'd highlight clients' travels and how they're spending their money. And it was kind of fun, but also just so painful because we couldn't actually say anything clear, like anything specific. All that's changed. But how does Testimonial IQ kind of come into this new era of marketing?
It started, you're right when the rule changed. It was like, oh, there's an opportunity here. And a lot of the tools that we saw were multi-segment. They were in not just for financial advisors, they were being used across. So they weren't really dialed into the marketing rules that we had. They were, close, but not exact. And in anything with compliance, you don't want to be close. You want to be exact, right? This is an area to risk. So Testimonial IQ at its core offering is that it is really a compliance tool for Google reviews. And it integrates fully for RIAs to use so that they are using them correctly and then can optimize them to drive more leads and volume through increased number of reviews and using them compliantly. And so a lot of people, you'll get two reactions. One is, I don't need a tool, I already do them. And unfortunately, many of those firms, when I run into them, they're not doing them compliantly, right? That they don't understand the subtleties of the rule or how they're approving and what they're asking and how they're pushing them out to their website and what they're doing. So there's a group that is testimonial forward, but maybe on the cut line of like being a little aggressive compliantly. And they're like, okay, let's keep using them, but let's make it compliant. Then there's another group where it's like, I'm not doing it because I don't want to get in trouble. Like I've seen firms get in trouble when they do it wrong. I don't want to do it right. Okay, good. We understand that as well. We built a total compliance process where your head of compliance logs in and this is how they run it. This is how your marketing group runs it. This is how you push it into production. It's a whole flow that allows you to do it compliantly. So it kind of addresses what I run into advisors, what are out there and what they're looking for. And what we have seen is an increase in volume, right? I mean, so why do it? One, you're doing it for the third-party validation, right? Somebody found, to your point of omnichannel, they're out there and they're checking you out because it's a referral from a great client and they want to know if you're any good. And it's like, oh, there's one review and it says you're crappy. Like, okay, let's not do that. Let's make sure we've got all of our happy clients saying great things about us. And so that's a really important aspect to get people through. In addition to that, it really helps generate leads through your website, right? So as you're doing this, it is absolutely helping your SEO and helping your on page and helping other people find your website and getting you more leads organically.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so, I mean, one of the things I always found is that so many advisors never really even spent any time setting up Google My Business, right? Like just the basic blocking and tackling of their search profile and presence had never been. And there's a lot of different marketing technologies that kind of serve, I would say, like the broker dealer channel, where you ultimately have this kind of lowest common denominator scenario where it's like, hey, we need to have a website, but we don't want to have a fancy website. We don't want to go through like a lot of like, hoops to make this special. It needs to be scalable. And so everyone, like it was scale or die in sort of those contexts. And then people would naturally just have this angst of like, well, this sucks. I need to get out of this. I need to grow and get into a more owned environment. But at the same time, they don't know how to build the recipe. And there weren't really great stewards out there doing that. They're going to sell them a point solution or, one-off, not like hey, this is best practice. So it's fun to see kind of the cracks being filled in with technology that really is more empathetic and, transformational for that whole aspect of business.
This industry is often behind in marketing. It's one of the reasons I love marketing in this industry is I'll do something that we feel is probably table stakes, but in financial services, people are like, that was amazing. And we're like, well, it actually wasn't that amazing. It just is in financial services. And, the idea that we still barely use testimonials is just like, we're behind the times. That is a basic part of how people make decisions today. You're right, to fill in the cracks and to see people lean into those things, because that's good for the consumer at the end of the day. Right? If you can help them make a more informed decision about who they should work with.
And I think that it speaks to the need for broad-based content. Like, I need to have an entire library of content that we're curating all the time. And, this tells this story. This is a use case. This is a problem we solved, but it's not just like, hey, here's like a 2-paragraph version of that. It's something that connects with people. It's shareable. Like, hey, John and I talked through this unique situation we solved with like backdoor Roth conversions or whatever it would be. But it's putting like more personality and more approachable nature around a problem that's probably pretty transcendent, getting into those things. And I think that's where, I see Adam and the team at Turncast are kind of solving that at scale for a lot of places. Like, hey, we have a story to tell. I don't have a lot of time. I'm not going to be the editor and, chief producer of this stuff, but I know the content and I want it to just be excellent and I want to do it one time. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. That's absolutely why this matters and why people need to be doing a lot of it. And then chopping it up into a million different, unique ways to fit into the story.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that as well. And it's, we talked earlier about kind of the 3 buckets. That middle bucket of inbound marketing where podcasting would fall to me is still not enough firms leaning into it.
Yeah, no, I think, years ago, Gary Vee would talk about like, hey, I want to create 64 pieces of content in a day. And then I'd look at my compliance queue. I'm like, if I get 4 pieces approved today, that's a miracle. And thankfully, there's a lot of technologies that have come in that have gotten better. People are replacing things like Smarsh with more modern technologies that are helping them scale. They have, compliance officers are using technology to really automate the work they're doing in a nice way. So it's starting to get better, and that will only expand in terms of the ways that people can get out there and do stuff.
And it's fun with Testimonial IQ. Our goal is to make compliance officers really happy. Like usually they're the ones who are saying no testimonials, and they're like, actually, that's the person we want to talk to, because once we show them this, they're going to see that there is a way to do it right, and to actually clean up your act. And so it's fun to actually work with more compliance folks who are so often, and rightfully so, hesitant to allow marketing to run ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So for this last part, let's talk about, all of these businesses are making steps. Every firm is in a different station of like hopefully maturing a little bit, and everyone's always got a long way to go. But as you put on your investor hat as a party at Great Hill, how are you seeing the ability to grow a business factor into the value of the business, or even the long-term attractiveness that you have toward the affinity toward a particular business that might be a good fit for you, for what you all do?
I think it's the story that you read out there in the press is true. If you have organic and are doing it well, you're going to get a premium. What I'll say is, as we even talked through the buckets, as you grow, you're going to need more and more channels to keep that same organic growth rate. And that was something I struggled with at Wealth Enhancement Group was, okay, if we're moving 15% on 2 billion, okay, that's a number, we're moving 300 billion. What if I need to do that on 20 billion or 40 billion? But I still need to do 15%. Like that number needs to scale, and you might only get so much from YouTube and so much from inbound marketing, so much, and that's where the channel marketing comes in. So, what I see out there specifically is there's a group of firms who are doing really well and are doing almost none. And at some point, my belief is that firm continues to grow organically through referrals and through probably, great work with clients, which is the root of all good, right? All the things that we ladder up to. It's going to slow over time. And so if you're comfortable building a slow growth in the firm, that's okay. But if you're not starting to add all these other tactics in, you're going to fall behind. And so I see kind of that firm. Then I see a whole group of firms who do one thing really well. They might be in a custodial referral network. They're in the Schwab referral network. They're crushing it in that. They don't do anything else. They're working with Smart Asset or Dataline or similar companies and crushing that, but not doing much else, right? So they're doing a thing really well. And then you can just look at that one and be like, oh, that's where I get excited. It's like, well, we're going to do 6 things really well, or 8. And we're going to figure the right order of operations and the right payback and the right way to step into each of those. It's just that same maturation channel. But again, if your goal is to be the same growth percentage at a much larger scale than today, you're going to need to add channels. And I think that's where a lot of firms are waking up to that fact.
Yeah, and I think the good example, not a good example, an example a lot of my friends and our friends that run these firms had gone through is like the cheese got moved on the custodial referral programs. All of a sudden now you have to have a lot higher AUM to qualify. And, that was a very big part of the success of a lot of these firms that are out there today. A lot of the folks that are advertising on television and, getting these big budgets. I mean, a lot of that was built off of the custodians referring them, relationships and then paying for it, obviously. But they had a really good channel and they were early adopters of that channel before everybody else woke up. And so I think that it's prudent to be looking for those all the time. Like, where are we going to find an edge? Maybe in our niche, maybe in our region, maybe in, using a technology like a Dataline. Where can we find that and really turn that corner and then repeat it and just have this system of like persistence and compounding that you need to have. And, it'll never slow. I think it's always going to be more stuff, but it's a fun challenge.
Yeah. And it's, the other thing is there are firms out there who just say, if it's like you said 1 to 3 years on the payback earlier in our conversation. So let's just say it's 2. A lot of firms that don't want to do that. I think they're crazy at 2, the way I understand the economics of the industry and valuations. But there are firms out there that say, wait, you're doing a 2-year payback? Yep, we're doing it all day. And they say, I don't want to do it. And that's that's just a different style firm. Those firms can be highly successful as well. They're just likely not going to grow organically like the rest.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think you have a lot of times you have the ownership suite is a little bit older and they're less inclined to keep reinvesting in the business. And that's okay. There's a lot of folks that would love to help take that forward for the next generation. And so there's a lot of next gen firms that are happening through these acquisitions as well. So that, you'll see a lot of that improvement over time.
You and I have both been, CMOs in this industry. I will say I was very fortunate in my time. I often had a very large, what I'll call test budget. And that means the part of the budget that hasn't proven itself yet. And the organizations that are going to build these large channels are going to have a test budget. That doesn't mean they're just flinging money willy-nilly into the media world to lose it. But it's at the same time, it's like, if I don't try a whole bunch of stuff, I don't know what is my 10th channel or my 12th channel. I've got to always be testing it on the edge. And sometimes those returns are great and sometimes they're not. And obviously that should be carefully managed. But to your point, some of those older ownership suites are like, I don't want to lean in and spend that test budget. You're like, well, you can probably decide what's going to happen. It's your one channel is going to burn out and you're going to be left with nothing. And that's not a great place to be.
Yeah, you always have to have an experiment going, even if nothing else for your own curiosity, but you're going to learn so much. You're going to learn so many things that actually influence the staples of your marketing and say, hey, if we did this, we implement this new thing that we found into this thing we've been doing for years, it could be so much better. It can add this seasoning to it. And so, yeah, I highly recommend if you get pushback, you should have your CEO call us because generally they always lead to something new. And, who wants to be in a stodgy, boring place where you do the same thing every day? Certainly not creative people. So if you want to attract creative people and retain them inside your environment, you got to have the ability to continue to create, continue to experiment, use the math to back up all these experiments. But ultimately, it just creates a really good spirit inside your team and inside the company.
Love it. I mean, I remember every private equity transaction I was a part of, it was part of different firms, would say, we don't know exactly what the next big thing is going to be, but it's going to be one of these 3 things. And we would say, these are the things we're going to be testing. I will say, looking back, we did hit one of those 3 things. It was one of those 3. And, the other 2 in hindsight, you're like, that wasn't a very good idea. But we had a great list, really methodically worked it, and one of them would pop because we would lean in on it. But without those 3 things, we would have been a slowing firm. And that's where I see so many firms that are leaving it all on the table out there.
Yeah, no, that's totally accurate. So John, how do people connect with you? Where's the best place for them to learn more about all the different things you're doing?
I'm pretty open book, so LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to find me. Shoot me a connect request. I'm John Wernz, last name is Wernz. So that's usually the easiest place to find me. I've got my contact information on there I seem to have because I'm on all these different boards and working in private equity, I have about 9 emails these days. So it's easier usually just to ping me on LinkedIn and find me there.
Very cool. Well, John, thanks so much for spending some time with us. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Rising Tide. We're excited to bring back more and more thoughtful conversations to help inspire you to grow and to be making a greater impact for your customers and your internal teams every day. So thanks so much.